about 9 o'clock on the morning of the 20th of December, General Bolling, along with a couple of staff officers, an aide, and 4 MPs, went to Verviers, Belgium, where the First Army headquarters was. He asked what the enemy information was, and the only thing they could tell him was it was fluid. Also, he asked for what the mission of the division would be in the marsh area. He was told that there the division should go into an assembly area.
As the front bulged further westward, the principal road centers of La Ruche and Saint-Vie, Belgium, fell to the Germans. Bastogne was encircled and its capitulation seemed certain. Unless the town of Marche, Belgium, remained in Allied hands, it seemed probable that the Germans could take the River Meuse and sweep on to Paris. The 84th Division was ordered to withdraw from its positions on the Rohr and take up a defensive line along the Marche-Houghton road.
It was at this time that we got sudden orders to move. We were loaded into the Army trucks and we started moving back. We heard all kinds of rumors. We heard the Germans had broken through. We heard there was a big offensive. Everything was confused, but all we knew, we were on the road and moving again. Of course, it had only been a month before that we'd moved up by truck, so we were kind of used to it. But this was a night move, in the dark, around the back corners, and orders were changed constantly. We never knew from one minute to the next what was going on. On our way back, we ran into trailers bringing up assault boats to cross rivers with. They apparently were for us, but we weren't going to be there to be with them. We finally found that at the end of this truck route, which was very circuitous, we ended up in the town of Marche in Belgium. And although our orders were a little unclear, we were told to hold the town at all costs. We had our first snow at this point, and digging foxholes in icy ground was a little difficult. But we kept always on the move. And our company seemed to be ending up as Division Reserve. So we were sent here and there on little jobs and filling up the gaps and trying to get the situation under control.
We spent our first night in Belgium billeted in a huge stone barn with hay and big fat cows and horses chomping around us, and we were excited to be where once again there was some life. We went down the road and had a nice chicken dinner with some eggs and milk, food that we hadn't had, it seemed like weeks and weeks. And there seemed to be no nervousness about Germans until later on that night when we spotted way across the valley a column of tanks going up the road, and somebody pointed out that those were German tanks, and we had been told we were miles and miles behind the front. And that's when we realized that there was a good deal of confusion in the general picture in Belgium. Well, after that, we went by truck to a little town called Wanlan and met a very lovely Belgian woman in a French or a Belgian chateau who had 2 daughters, and she was just getting them into the car to drive them to Brussels. She said they had an appointment with the oculist, and it was only later that we realized she was fleeing as fast as she could, and she knew that the situation was very bad. And later on that night, we had our first encounter with some German tanks which came along and fired at us, and we fired back, and they went on back the road that they'd come from, but we realized we were in what they call a fluid situation with nobody quite certain where the front lines were, least of all us.
I'm Major General Bill Sutton, and I was a battalion commander in General Bolling's 84th Railsplitter Division during World War II. I arrived at the rear CP of the 84th Division in Holland on the 20th of December 1944 and moved down with the division to Marche, Belgium on the 22nd of December to say that the situation was fluid is putting it lightly. In Marche, Belgium, every other house was occupied by Germans, and there was firing up and down the streets. The 34th Infantry had organized positions along the front edge of the Marche-Houghton Ridge. I can remember that the foxholes were sometimes 150 yards apart. And they'd been dug in frozen ground, sometimes with the aid of explosives. The position was considerably overextended, and various pockets of German tanks and infantry existed all up and down the line. And during the day, the Germans had infiltrated tanks and infantry into a wooded area back of the front lines and in front of the reserve elements. And they were discovered quite by accident by a small unit going up to reinforce an attack. Took the wrong road and ran into this pocket of German tanks and infantry. And they backed off and reported this. The 84th Division artillery fired on this pocket, which was pretty well defined, and they knocked out all of these tanks and killed several hundred Germans. When the artillery had finished firing, one battalion, I remember the 326, had only 6 rounds of ammunition left. We had other ammunition on the way, but no one knew exactly when it would get there, and it was a rather touch-and-go situation. There are many things imprinted on my mind that will make me always remember the kind of stuff our American soldiers were made of. One incident in particular occurred in the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge. We were advancing toward Belgium, and a mortar shell came in and wounded several men right close around me. There was one man that was almost in arm's reach of me, and I could see that he was hit badly with the back of his head practically blown off, and he was in a state of shock. I tried to comfort the man, prop his head up until the medics could reach him, and all this time, and I shall never forget this man was trying to apologize for me for being hit, and sorry, almost crying, because he would not get to carry on with the battalion and continue the fight.
The Marche-Houghton line, situated as it was at the extreme tip of the Bulge, received the full weight of the German attack. Chance had placed the fate of this offensive in the hands of an American infantry division. For the men of the 84th, there was no question as to what must be done. See it next on The Big Picture.